Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of the Hawks Eye Podcast. I am your host, Bryce Coots, and today we're joined by a special guest, someone that I've had on previous shows a lot, and someone that I really value their insight of because they are tapped into this Seattle Seahawks organization, and that is Gregg Bell of the Tacoma News Tribune, Seahawks beat reporter there. He will be joining me on the show today to discuss the Seahawks' current state, where they're at, what kind of vibes he's getting from being inside that building on a regular basis, and how good does he really think this team can be? Will they make some noise at the trade deadline? And what is he expecting over the back half of the Seattle Seahawks season? So before we get into doing any of that type of stuff, as always, love the support you guys have given this channel as I've started to grow this over in the past short few months before the Seattle Seahawks season took over. So again, we're getting closer to that 2,000 goal mark. I'm currently at 1,200 subscribers. So if you are unsubscribed, it doesn't cost you anything, and it's greatly appreciated over here. And please click that subscribe button. Click the notifications if you never want to miss an episode, and like any of the content coming up. And also leave comments. Engage in the comment. The community we built over here at the Hawks Eye is fantastic. I love the insight you guys bring. I love interacting with you guys. It's amazing. And also for those who listen on Spotify and the audio side, again, leave a rating over there. Helps me out over there. And again, I appreciate all the support you guys give on the audio side, as that is really kind of taken off over the last few weeks, which has been fantastic. So with that all being said, let's get into it. Let's have a great conversation with Gregg Bell of the Tacoma News Tribune right after this. Well, everyone, welcome back in, and I've got guest Gregg Bell with me from the Tacoma News Tribune. Gregg does an amazing job covering the Seattle Seahawks and the Mariners this year, which was awesome to see. Gregg, haven't had a chance to have you on the new show here, the Hawks Eye, but how you been, Gregg, and what's new with you?
Busy, Bryce. Yeah, they peeled me off. Jacksonville went straight to Toronto to cover the Mariners from the Seahawks. So a little double duty there for a couple of weeks. It would have kept going. I'd be in Dodger Stadium, where I'd probably be back in Seattle covering the World Series now. Had Game 7 gone over it. But, back to my day job now with the Seahawks and heading to Washington this weekend. And they still have some East Coast trips. And they still got some more travel to do here the second half of the season.
Yeah, you're kind of like, with that whole thing going from Jacksonville to Toronto, you're like those Dos Equis commercials, the most interesting man covering Seattle sports at this moment, going all over the place. But let's kind of take a look at this team, Gregg, because you have the ability to be in there and be around this team throughout the starting half of the season and throughout multiple seasons. What's the state of the Seahawks compared to last year at this point? We're 5-2. After the losses this weekend for, the 49ers and such, the Seahawks are one of the top sitting NFC teams, I should say, in the top 4 and top of the NFC West. Is this team any different than they were last year? Are they more confident, or coming out of this bye, are they maybe even a little bit more cautious in some respects?
Well, Bryce, they're more in Coach Mike Macdonald's mold. They're more what he wants them to be. This time last year, they were just acquiring Ernest Jones. This time last year, their starting center up and retired at age 27 out of nowhere, Connor Williams, and that caused a cavalcade of events. And it's him starting unintended starter at the end of last season. Now they have Jalen Sindell in at center. They've drafted a left guard in the mold of exactly how they want to block in the zone blocking scheme. They've re-signed their right tackle. They're probably going to re-sign their left tackle beyond the fifth-year option here pretty soon. And with Ernest Jones in the defense, they are what Mike Macdonald wanted them to be all along last year. Ernest Jones just transformed them. The comparison to last year is that while they are in the mold of Mike Macdonald, they are not consistent at all, especially on offense. And even defensively, they've had tackling issues even when they've been playing well, especially in the secondary. And as we all know, they've yet to be whole in that secondary since the fifth play of the season. That may change Sunday night in Washington. And when it does, when Devin Witherspoon comes back, Julian Love comes back, with Nick Emanwori already back from his 4 games missed, they're going to make some changes. And it's not going to be the same secondary it's been for the last couple of years. I'm thinking about Reek Woolen in particular. So they're unsettled on defense because they've yet to be whole, and they're inconsistent on offense. They are to be determined. They had a fast start, remember, last year. They were 3-0 right out of the gate. Then they started playing the division games. Those will be the tell. Are they physical enough at the line of scrimmage to beat San Francisco and the Rams? They should have beaten San Francisco, but didn't because of yet another turnover, and that's usually how they lose games to the 49ers. But until further notice, Bryce, they are still behind on the line of scrimmage, the Rams and the 49ers. And if they aren't better than those two teams on the line of scrimmage, they aren't winning division. If they're not winning the division, they're not having home playoff games, and we're back to where we've been for most of the last decade, which is 9-8, 10-7, getting in a wild card and going on the road in January. So I guess it's the long answer to your question. The short summation is they are incomplete and inconsistent, and I'm not convinced their 5-2 record is indicative of them either way, whether they're better than that or maybe they're not as good as that record.
So when you talk to players and coaches and you know, you're inside that building, what's kind of the theme that keeps coming up with that team? Do they view themselves in that way, that they're not consistent enough, or is there another term that comes up with that group when you talk to them?
Well, they're unfulfilled, and they're playing for the coaching staff, Mike Macdonald leading it, but Kubiak on offense, the defensive staff led by Macdonald and Adendirty, they have the advantage of preaching to these guys, look, turn on the tape. Look how we aren't blocking zone blocking schemes correctly. Look how we're not converting on third down because we're losing on first and second down. On defense, look how many missed tackles we have, especially in the open field off short passes. And the advantage of them harping on them is they're harping on them while being 5-2 in first place in the division. So they're going to have a captive audience that'll listen, and they haven't been demoralized or they haven't been turned off, and they haven't thinking that the coaching staff doesn't know what they're doing because they're 2-5 in the last place. So they have a growth mindset, and that they're not yet there, yet they are 5-2. So they're starting from a higher floor for a team that has so much more still work to do. Macdonald says he's really excited by that part of it because he knows if they were 2-5, it'd be a harder sell to push these improvements on this team. But the consistency is what's really been lacking in both offense and defense.
So what surprised you the most through the first 7 weeks of this season? Is it the inconsistency, especially like say in the run game? Is it the inconsistency in the defense on the tackling side? What for you has been the most surprising thing for the first 7 weeks, Greg?
First, foremost is the defensive line. I didn't think that they could generate as much pressure as they have without blitzing. I thought Nick Emanwori, when he played, would be blitzing all over the place. I figured Devin Witherspoon would be playing more than 2 of the first 7 games and would be blitzing quite a bit. I thought Boye Mafe and Derek Hall would be bigger factors in the pass rush. Mafe's been almost a 0 in the pass rush so far, and now Derek Hall's been injured the last couple games. The front 4 has been the pass rush, and they had the highest pressure rate with the lowest blitz rate for a lot of the first month and a half of the season. Their numbers tailed off a little bit since then. And on the corollary of that, Bryce, they are number 1 in the NFL against the run. Now, what surprises me about that is there are a lot of teams that have not even tried to run against Seattle. And it surprised me that Jacksonville didn't run more. Tampa Bay didn't run more. Houston didn't run more. Houston was averaging 120-plus yards rushing a game. They got 54 on like 16, 18, 19 carry, whatever it was, on that Monday night game. It's like their numbers, their reputation is preceding them going into games. The teams aren't even wanting to challenge the number 1 ranked rushing defense. Well, there aren't a lot of opportunities to have run defense the way opponents have not run against them. I'd run more against Seattle. I'd run right at them on early downs. I'd run more on third downs than teams have run against them to try to mitigate the front four's pass rush and slow down Leonard Williams and DeMarcus Lawrence, who just run straight up the field by and large. I mean, they do some crosses in X games, but basically their job on third down is to beat the tackle up the field. And if they have to worry about the run game, they can't be as fast as doing that. I am surprised how teams have not tested Seattle more in the run game. Offensively, I've been surprised that this team has not run the ball to me, they haven't run the ball nearly what they're supposed to. The numbers show that they're middle of the pack, 19th, I think it is, in rushing. But they're next to last in yards per carry because they've rushed it more than anybody in the league. 49% of the plays Seattle's run this season are the run. That's by far the most in the NFL. Yet they haven't been an I formation a lot because Robbie Utes hasn't been in there for 4 or 5 weeks. They're at 10, 11% in 11 personnel, or 21 personnel, and 22 personnel at 10%. I mean, those are numbers that are usually 25% under Klint Kubiak. So they haven't played at all offensively the way they were designed to and what they brought Kubiak in to do, yet they're 5-2. It surprises me how much the preponderance of targets go to Jackson Smith and Jigba without teams trying to take him away more than they've been able to. He's been beaten cloud coverage. He's been beaten bracket coverage. He's been beaten man. He's been beaten zone. He's been catching 18-yard out routes on 4th and 1 when most quarterbacks would throw to the tight end in the flat for 2 yards. Darnold throws to him backside, third read. He just throws, no matter what play calls, he's throwing to Smith and Jigba right now. Usually in the NFL, you don't just rely on one guy on all route trees and all reads and have the success that Smith and Jigba's had so far this season. It's almost like they're doing it with smoke and mirrors offensively so far to me, Bryce. We'll see when the division games come down the road if this can continue. To me, enter in the run game.
So let's talk a little bit about that run game, Greg, because it's been driving me nuts as well, sitting here watching, especially what we got kind of promised this offseason. And to your point, the personnel they brought in, the coaching staff they brought in, like we were supposed to be a very good running football team. And you look at the preseason and we haven't seen that. So first off, like, what's the player view on why this running game isn't working? Like, are the players kind of got an idea of what the issues are, and or even the coaches for that matter, on what is actually causing this run game to trip up?
Bryce, when you talk to the linemen, they say targeting. Every time you ask them about, we got to get better in targeting. And then in a couple of weeks, it was communication. What's targeting? Well, when you are supposed to block the inside shoulder of the defensive tackle in the C gap, don't block his chest or his outside shoulder. Block his inside shoulder. Well, the problem with that, of course, is defensive tackles don't just stand there like electric football players. They have a job to do, and they're moving, and they're slanting, and they know what Seattle's trying to do in the run game. So they're not just going to be statuesque and let themselves get blocked out of the zone. So they have not been physical enough at the point of attack to move away defensive linemen who are moving into the gap that they want to run through. In the most simplest terms, a zone blocking scheme is getting outside horizontal, getting to the outside rushing lane, at the same time that the running back is marrying to that blocker arriving. If the timing and the push is not there, the play dies. Zach Charbonnet has had like 5 guys in his face almost every time he's had the ball, which is why he's at 1.1 yards per carry on outside zone, which is the worst in the league. Kenneth Walker is a little bit better at eluding guys that are in the backfield. He still is of the best 2 and 3 yard runs that the Seahawks maybe have ever had. Because of how many people are in the backfield, he can still elude them. And that's why he's a large reason he's at 5.5 in his outside zone rushes. But they're only running outside zone the last few weeks at like 17% clip because they've been unable to get the horizontal movement in the push. They've had to resort to some inside zone and even some trap pulls, some gap scheme to try to get something going in the run game beside just outside zone. So that's why when they're not playing as designed, it's supposed to be outside zone 60-70% of the time. The coaches will tell you that we just have to keep going with it. And I'm sure fans, people listening to this are frustrated by them running the ball when they're not gaining yards. But Kubiak and Macdonald are convinced that they have to do that. One, to get the running game eventually to take hold within games and week over week, but 2, to run the play action passes and slow down pass rushes against it. McDonald was really scarred last year, Bryce, by what Ryan Grubb was doing by just going back and dropping back the throw and chucking the ball all over the place. Basically, in the middle of the season, Grubb just gave up on running. They ended up 29th in the league in rush attempts. They just didn't try by the end of the season. Well, it's the opposite now. They're 49% run team because Kubiak's going to run come hell or high water, whether they get 1 or 11 yards, he's going to hand the ball off. They really, truly believe that Sam Darnold's at his best when they are running the ball so they can run play action and boot off of it. Kubiak is not one of these. So I know there are some analytics out there that say you don't need a running game to run play action, that's a fallacy. Kubiak doesn't believe that. He believes, and so does Macdonald, as a defensive mind, believe that you have to run to make the defense honest in their pass rush and slow it down. So you're going to still see running for 1 and 0 yards and running on 2nd and 9 and even running on 3rd and 5 when they shouldn't be running because they're not gaining yards, because that's how they want to build this and be designed toward it. It's how they drafted Zabel. It's the offensive line is constructed this way. It just bottom line is they're not pushing guys around enough. They're not being strong enough at the point of attack.
So speaking of the not being able to be strong enough at the point of attack, obviously they went with Jalen Sundell at center. I know we talked in the offseason and you thought Jalen Sundell would probably win this job because of how much they were talking about him in the offseason. Almost unprompted, they were bringing up Jalen Sundell's name for an undrafted center. And then you've got Anthony Bradford beside him, who obviously won the battle in camp over Christian Haynes. Do you sense that either one of those two, if this running game doesn't start producing, could get changed out, whether that's Olu going in at center or whether that's Christian Haynes getting an opportunity at right guard instead of Anthony Bradford?
Well, Olu Atimi now, this is the second coaching staff who has decided that he's not going to be their starting center. And Sundell beat him out. It was Olu Atimi's job at the start of camp, and Sundell passed him during training camp. Sundell's more athletic, but he's not quite as strong as some of the defensive tackles at 300-plus pounds he's got to move. And I don't see them making that change. I think the Bradford change at right guard would happen before Sundell at center. Bradford has had huge problems in pass protection on a line that has otherwise been very good overall pass protecting. And he's also had some run issues and penalty issues. The problem at right guard is who's going to take us? Christian Haynes has been on the injured reserve list, and he had 3 chances to win this job, including this summer, and couldn't win it. They had Shane Lemieux in here, and then he got, I don't know, out of nowhere. I talked to him one day in the locker room, and he's talking about how, yeah, I'm good to go in this offense because I ran it in New Orleans last year. And then 3 days later, he was on practice squad injured reserve. See you later. I don't know quite where that injury came from, other than it had to be in a practice on a scout team. So there's no heir apparent at right guard right now inside the house. There's a lot of talk about the Seahawks trading before November 4th trading deadline for right guards. But any team that's willing to trade a right guard at this point in the season, that right guard is probably not very good because a lot of teams don't have interior line play. So if you have one that's worth playing, you're going to keep him and not trade him. It's an issue. The right guard issue in particular has been an issue. It's sometimes why they've been left-handed during games. They started the season running behind Cross and Zabel quite a bit, especially in Pittsburgh when they had their only 100-yard game with Kenneth Walker. And then since then, they haven't nearly been as left as they were early in September. I think that's where they should go on short yardage more than they have. But to answer your question, we asked yesterday, Monday, Mike Macdonald, was your bye week study of the running game include potentially personnel changes up front? And he flatly said no. And I took that answer to mean, who are we going to put in there that we don't? Timmy and Christian Haynes are the 2 options that we're talking about, and they already had passed on them.
So the last question I'll ask you about this whole running game thing here, and even this offense in general, Greg, is do you sense that there is like maybe a bit of internal frustration kind of brewing up, whether it be with the coaches or players, about like an offensive imbalance per se, and even offensive usage in the pass game being imbalanced? Like you talked about JSN, and Sam's literally looking at him as 3rd or 4th in the progression on the backside. Elijah Arroyo hasn't been able to really get going. AJ Barner's sporadic within being in the red zone target. Cooper Kupp has kind of been a sporadic use player, and you've seen the passing game basically go through JSN. And now we're talking about a running game that's not really functioning. Do you sense there's a bit of frustration with how this offense is kind of out of sorts a little bit in some ways, even though they are 5-2 and one of the top offenses in the NFL?
I don't sense frustration, Bryce, because they're winning. If they were 2-5, there'd be a lot of complaining and bickering about how JSN's getting all the targets. I asked Macdonald, I've asked Kubiak, I've asked Darnold this. They're all telling me, and we're calling plays to throw it to Cooper Kupp and to Torrey Horton down the field, who's been open more than he's been thrown to, and to Arroyo and to Barner. But in Macdonald's words, the plays just don't go that way. Well, who decides where the plays go? The quarterback. And when push comes to shove and he's got a 300-pound edge rusher or nose tackle in his face, he's throwing to Smith-Njigba. The touchdown pass over the middle in the end zone in the first half in Houston was a perfect example of that. There was a defensive tackle that beat Anthony Bradford off the snap and was about to smack Darnold in the face. And Darnold stood in the pocket and waited for Smith-Njigba to break across the end zone from right to left under the goalpost. He waited and knowing he was going to get clocked, because he was counting on, of all the receivers out in the pattern, I'm going to throw this guy no matter if I'm going to get hit or not. Touchdown, dunk over the goalpost, and they take an early lead in the first half. 4th and 1 against Houston. They have a rollout pass to the left. Tight end Barner is in the flat about 2 yards and got a linebacker near him. Smith-Njigba was not yet breaking into his out route that was 18 yards down the field. And Darnold noticeably looked at Barner and ignored him beyond the line of game, and waited and threw to Smith-Njigba a lower percentage pass, 18 yards down the field, somewhat covered. He completed it in coverage for a gain down to the red zone. And I asked Darnold after the game about that specific play, and he said it was his progression. His read was that the linebacker was too close to the tight end in the flat. It made it a risky play that could have gotten knocked down. In his mind, he felt Smith-Njigba was a better option to beat the corner on the out route deeper, 20 yards, 18 yards down the field. So when the quarterback is deciding in the moment that number 11 is my best option, it doesn't matter what the play calls are. If he's going to go backside third read because he knows Smith-Njigba is going to break late on a backside in route, that's where he's going to throw the ball. If he thinks that Smith-Njigba is going to beat this guy on 4th and 1 for an 18-yard out route, that's where he's going to throw the ball. And as long as they are winning, those decisions sit well in the locker room. If he starts throwing interceptions and they start losing games, then it'll be like, why didn't you throw to the 2-yard out route? So I don't sense frustration. I do get a sense that Cooper Kupp thought he'd be more than he's been so far. He hasn't said that. He's been a good soldier. Let's see. It's still early in the season, 7 out of 17 games. But if he's targeted as few times as he has been, he's going to get a little bit antsy. Not that will have a negative detriment impact, but he's not here to be a 20% target guy that he has been most games.
Yeah, that's the one player in particular for me that I've kind of wondered about, Greg, is Cooper Kupp. And yes, we know he came in to be kind of the veteran receiver and kind of replace a little bit of what Tyler Lockett's role was here in Seattle. But I think he expected to be a little bit more involved in this offense. And when he has had his opportunity, he has been quite effective outside of his reverse pass, which don't get me started on that whole decision and process. I wasn't a big fan of that, but I want to talk to you about the trade. I want to talk to you a little bit here about the trade deadline and kind of get your feel on this team. Do you think for the 3rd year in a row, John Schneider is going to make a deadline deal that will kind of bring in reinforcements to this team? And maybe, it is maybe a guy like a Wyatt Teller or a receiver or a corner. How do you expect this trade deadline to shape up for Seattle? Do you expect them to reinforce? Do you expect them to kind of ride it out with who they got?
Here's a little inside ball on Wyatt Teller. The locker room and the coaching staff, Mike Macdonald in particular, do not like him. They are upset still about Uchenna Nwosu's knee injury in the preseason game against Cleveland at the end of the 2024 preseason. They thought that was a cheap shot, that Teller should have been disciplined. It was a legal play in the truest sense of the rules, but veterans know that in a preseason game that players are just rounding out, trying to get ready for the regular season. You don't do that. The chop block that he was already getting engaged high and Teller came in low. I would be shocked if Wyatt Teller came into that locker room. If he did, there might be the first locker room fight of the Mike Macdonald era because Uchenna Nwosu and his defensive mates would not appreciate that. I do think they're going to be active. I think that Snyder is always on the phone. He loves to be priding himself on knowing what everybody's doing, even if it doesn't involve Seattle, what trades are out there. I would expect that they will try to shop Reek Woolen, but I would expect that Woolen's not going to garner the return that the Seahawks could get if they just hold on to him and let him become an unrestricted free agent. Remember, Woolen made the Pro Bowl as a rookie. And since then, he's been almost an every down starter. I mean, a 90+% snap guy since then. He's very likely to command a third-round pick as a compensatory pick if he leaves an unrestricted free agency. A Pro Bowl player who has started for 4 years, that's usually the threshold of a third, fourth-round pick. If they can't fetch that in the trade market, why would you trade him? So everyone's saying, well, trade Woolen. Well, for what? If a team's going to give him a late-round pick, just hold on to him for the depth issue, if nothing else, because of all the injuries they've had in the secondary, and then let him sign an unrestricted free agency somewhere else and get a third or fourth-round pick for him in the spring. I think that's what that situation is going to end up being. I think, by the way, Woolen is probably the odd man out with Witherspoon coming back and Eamon Worry being so good at nickel in the last 4 games, because if you don't move Eamon Worry, where are you going to put Witherspoon? You're going to put him outside. If you're going to put him outside as a corner, what are you going to bench Josh Jobe? Mike Macdonald loves Josh Jobe. So does Carl Scott, the secondary coach. They love how he plays the ball and they love how he tackles. So there's no room to me in a base or even nickel to play Woolen. They may end up playing more dime than they have with Ernest Jones as the only linebacker on the field, so they can get Woolen and Witherspoon and Eamon Worry all on the field at the same time. You may see more dime against Washington than they've been playing. They needed interior defensive line depth because Jonathan Hankins may have even retired and we don't even know it. I don't know what's going on with him. We've asked all the time and then we get these really vague answers. I don't think doesn't seem like he's going to play again. And we mentioned the offensive line, interior offensive line help, a Shane Lemieux type of signing. That's the kind of trades that it's not going to knock your socks off type of deals I think they may end up making.
The Wyatt Teller thing's definitely an interesting tidbit that you gave us there, Greg. Because like I'm thinking, when I was looking out at the trade market, and I'm going, they're not going to go after a Thibodeau. They're not going to go make a big splash like they've done with the Leonard Williams or an Ernest Jones, because this team, they don't need to go make that big splash trade. But that's where a name like a Kevin Zeitler or someone like that, maybe they were able to grab them off and bring them into the competition, kind of a thing. But the Reek Woolen thing, I'm totally there with you as well. Why trade a player or trade him for the sake of trading him when you're going to get more value if he walks away in free agency at the end of the season than you are to just kind of trade him for the sake of it. But no, that was some interesting stuff right there, Greg. And so I want to get your thoughts on this. Stock up or stock down? So give me 2 players for you, Greg, from the offseason to now that stock's risen for you, and 2 players where the stock's kind of started to go in the wrong direction for them.
A.J. Barner is the first one that comes to mind. Especially earlier in the season, not so much the last couple games, but as much as Darnold was throwing to him in the red zone was really surprising for a quarterback who'd never played with this guy before this season, and for a tight end who was viewed as much as a blocker as he was a receiver out of Michigan and Indiana. Barner walks around talking about he wants to be the best tight end in the NFL, the best blocker in the NFL. He's a very confident guy who speaks his confidence. And the Seahawks play calls in the red zone and Darnold's decision has spoken to that. They are believing in him more and more. And for a second-year player, a middle-round guy, he has produced more than as advertised. Secondly, well, I don't think anyone's expected Smith and Jigba to be leading the NFL in receiving yards by hundreds of yards over Jamar Chase, which is what he's been in the last couple of weeks. So that is even high. I didn't see that coming this year. I thought it'd be a more spread the wealth distribution of yards and catches so far this season than it's been. I thought Cooper Kupp would have more of an impact than he already has. So Smith and Jigba, while his stock is high, I think is higher than anyone could have imagined. So there's 2 on offense. On defense, Drake Thomas has basically benched a draft pick that Mike Macdonald had started last year and Tyrese Knight. And this is a guy who they got off waivers from the Raiders. He was a special teams guy only, fringe roster, potential practice squad type player who now finds himself sometimes as the only, along with Ernest Jones, the only off-ball linebackers on the field. On key situations, red zones, third downs, Drake Thomas's stock has soared. Ty Okada to a lesser extent, because there are some teams, mainly San Francisco and the opener, Tampa Bay a little bit, who exposed him when Julian Love wasn't playing and Eamon Worry got hurt. But Drake Thomas, to me, stock is far higher than anyone could have imagined. way up on defense. Stock down, Anthony Bradford. He had an impressive training camp, was physical enough to win the job over Haynes, and that's the main reason he's there is he's just stronger and rougher and nastier than Haynes is to play interior line. And it hasn't shown up very much in the run or pass protection games. And the stock down, Zach Charbonnet, he's getting the opportunity. He's playing 53% of the snaps. He has more carries than Kenneth Walker, yet for as many carries as he has the lowest yards per rush in the league. I mean, when you look at the yards per rush in the NFL, all the dudes he's down there with in the 3.1s and 2.8s, I think it's 2.8, are dudes who carried 3 times all season. He's by far has the most carries with the fewest yards per carry of anyone in the league. I know he has, 4 or 5 touchdowns rushing now because they made him a short yardage back. And let's talk briefly why all that has been. Fans keep asking me, why are they playing Charbonnet so much? Well, first of all, they've decided that Charbonnet is their short yardage and 2-minute back. Third down back for pass protection and pass catching as well. So if you're going to be your third down back, your short yardage back, and your 2-minute back, those specialties could often be more than half the first half. So that's how you get above 50% right off the top. The other bigger reason is they're trying to manage Kenneth Walker through the entire season with a foot issue that he has had since August. When I got to Green Bay, I learned that Walker's foot injury in the summer that was causing him to miss practices in training camp is related to the high ankle sprain that he had in December last year that he ended up on injured reserve. So this thing has been a lingering issue since last winter. They need to get him 17 games, not just for their offense, but for Kenneth Walker. Walker has this much money and this many teams he's signed to for next season. Zilch. His rookie contract's going to end in January. So he wants to be out there every single week to audition for his next job he wants to get game tape so that everybody can see it. It's not going to do him any good to get 50, 70, 80% of the snaps one week and then be out for 2 weeks because he couldn't handle the workload. He's on board with this job share with Charbonnet because he's trying to make it through 17 games. So he has 17 auditions for a new contract this year. It's going to be interesting to me to see if the production stays as skewed as it has, if the Seahawks can not succumb to the temptation of playing Walker more. I mean, we saw it against Houston. Right in the middle of drives, Walker was the more productive back, and then he got yanked right in the middle of the series. That's how much they're trying to manage this foot thing and keep him healthy through the entire season.
So, Greg, the thing that you brought up there about Walker's foot injury, did it not get why did it not get fixed? Did it re-aggravate itself in training camp from this high ankle sprain and they just are kind of trying? Okay, so that's what kind of occurred. Because I'm kind of curious on usually in the offseason these guys get any sort of procedures or stuff done to fix anything. So that's really interesting to know about the foot injury that they're trying to manage. They
mothballed him, Bryce, all spring into summer. They didn't have him do much at all in OTAs and mini camps. He was the beginning of it was noticeable that he was practicing full go the first couple of days of training camp, and then he started missing 3 out of every 4 days in early August. And so the full go at the start of training camp led to him developing a foot issue that they said, okay, we got to back off. And now they still are in that mode of, okay, we got to back off, and they still believe that they can't put the pedal down and give him full load, trying to massage that through the entire season.
So I'll just ask you this right now, Greg, before we get into our next topic, because we're on these running backs right now. Do you expect both of them to be on Seattle's roster next year or only one of them? And I know Charbonnet is contractually on the roster next year regardless, but do you think Seattle potentially goes and drafts themselves a running back to replace one of these two?
Yes. And I don't think the way they've played Walker and how expendable that position is and how teams are really reluctant to give second contracts and guaranteed money to running backs because of the injury issue, I'm not really sure that Kenneth Walker is going to be here next year. We may be seeing the last half season of him in a Seahawk uniform. This whole division, this whole league really has been spooked ever since the Rams gave $60 million guaranteed to Todd Gurley right after the Super Bowl year. He immediately got injured and was never a factor for them again. They 2 years into that deal, the Rams ate it, and they ate a ton of dead cap money and guaranteed money doing it. And the lesson was running backs get hurt so much. It's the most, as we know, the most injured position with the shortest shelf life in the game. It's cold to say they're a dime a dozen, but for the amount of injuries versus the amount of availability, you don't want to invest in a second contract necessarily, bigger money to a player who may not be on the field that much. You would rather go draft and have under rookie contract a guy who you're basically recycling and refreshing the position back to a 22, 23-year-old. 26-year-old's contract ends after 4 years of getting banged up and not completing a single full season. Go back to the 22-year-old right out of college and start over again. It's what they did with Chris Carson. It's what they did with Thomas Rawls. It's what they're doing, it appears, with Chris Carson. Carson would be, if they re-sign Kenneth Walker, if they re-sign Kenneth Walker, it would be an anomaly to what John Schneider has done in the last half dozen years or so at that position of drafting, in Thomas Rawls' case, undrafted rookie free agent getting the job, and then riding them until they get hurt, and then going back to square one again and starting with the rookie out of college. I don't know that they're going to do a top draft pick for one, but Chris Carson was a 7th-round pick. Thomas Rawls was an undrafted rookie. So
I have one, Greg, one dream pick for them if they're going to draft a running back, and that is Jonah Coleman out of Washington. But I don't think he'll be there when they want to pick a running back, unfortunately, because I was down there at the Illinois game this past weekend and watched him live, and it reaffirmed everything I thought about Jonah Coleman since I've seen him as a Husky, and I'd love to see him in this offense.
It'd be interesting in how high they will draft one next year, because they still have to draft interior offensive and defensive lines. There's still depth and youth issues there. Their defensive line interior is suddenly somewhat old. I know Byron Murphy's only in his 2nd year, but Jaron Reed's in the last year of his contract. Leonard Williams is now pushing 32, 33 years old. Marcus Lawrence is 32, going on 33 in his 12th season. You got to backfill that eventually.
So speaking of this defense, Greg, how different does this defense feel to last year's group, even? Because there's a lot of returning players from last year's group, but how does it feel in general? And this group, when they're fully healthy, I'm not going to say they're going to be Legion of Boom 2.0, which a lot of people always are so quick to christen the next great looking defense in Seattle as LOB 2.0, but how close are they to being considered potentially one of the better groups the Seahawks have had in their history as a whole, just by how they're playing?
The whole defense or the secondary?
The whole defense.
They are in a half season. Well, let's call it a full season. The half season end of last year and the half season to start this year, the best they've been since the Legion of Boom back-to-back Super Bowl years. And Ernest Jones and Devin Witherspoon, to me, are the 2 best players on that defense, and they haven't had one of them but for 2 of the first 7 games. So I would hold off a little bit on the comparisons and saying how great this is in team history. They have set themselves up to play the way they want, to stop the run, create long 3rd downs, and let the pass rush get after you. If they can continue to get the pass rush with the front 4 and drop 7 into coverage, that math is often going to work out for the defense. You're having 7 guys in coverage against 4, 5 receivers, sometimes 3 eligible receivers. That's your odds are in your favor there. So can they continue to do that? If they can, then they will be leading the league in points allowed by the end of the season, and all the metrics of DVOA and all of that is going to remain high, and pressure rates. And if they can keep that pressure rate without blitzing, that's a huge deal for Macdonald. Having said all of that, I know the Rams are going to run the ball against the Seahawks. I know the 49ers will always run the ball against the Seahawks, no matter who's in the field and who's hurt. So they're not – it will surprise me if they're the number 1 NFL defense against the run those 3 games, the 2 Rams games and the San Francisco game. And if they are, they're going to win the NFC West. But until I can see it in my own eyes and be proven that they are better than the Rams and the 49ers along the line of scrimmage, they just aren't. They haven't been for a half dozen years. Even with the 49ers injuries, the way they play is going to test Seattle more than anybody's tested them defensively. So to me, this whole season comes down to the 2 Rams games, one of which here is in a couple of weeks down in Inglewood, and the 49er game. If they win those games, they're going to win a division, and we're talking about home playoff games with that defense, with the crowd noise and the weather. Now you're playing Macdonald's way, the way Macdonald wants them to play in January. So To be determined, I guess, is the way to answer that.
So it's interesting because you talk about Ernest Jones and Devin Witherspoon. We know how loud Devin can be and just his demeanor that he has. But the one thing I was going to ask you has Ernest Jones become more of an emotional anchor for that defense inside that locker room than maybe people anticipate? Because he has gotten a little bit more vocal this year. There was obviously the mic'd up segment with him, but just how he's bouncing around and stuff. Would you say he's more the emotional leader in some respects for that defense, or is it still Devin Witherspoon?
Oh, day to day in the locker room, it's definitely Ernest Jones, and in the meeting rooms. And Ernest Jones has the cachet. He's done it before. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been a play caller for a Super Bowl champion defense. He's played for now 3 different teams. He's been around the block a little bit, and he plays the position that demands that he leads. He's the quarterback of the defense, the signal caller that is the extension of Mike Macdonald. Devin Witherspoon, yes, he's loud and he's brash, and especially the defensive secondary loves to follow his lead. But I don't get the sense Jaron Reed and DeMarcus Lawrence and Leonard Williams are turning around and looking at what Devin Witherspoon is doing to get their fuel and motivation and their lead to what they need to do defensively. They've got Ernest Jones barking at him right in their ear hole, right behind them, 2 or 3 yards from where they're lining up on every play. Jones, to me, has been a revelation. The Seahawks at middle linebacker last year, the first half of the season, it was atrocious. They would hit a guy, we're talking Dodson and Baker, would hit a guy 4 yards from the line of scrimmage and get dragged for another 8 yards. It looked like tin cans on an exhaust pipe of an old broken down car. It was not at all how Mike Macdonald needed them to play defense. When Ernest Jones showed up, Bryce, when he hit a guy at 4 yards, it was a 4-yard gain. That, to me, that's all the difference in the world of middle linebacker play. If it's 2nd and 6 instead of 1st and 10, you have a chance of getting off the field and the team punting instead of the team going in a field goal or touchdown range. And that's the difference between winning and losing games, punting or scoring. That's the name of the game on defense, and Ernest Jones single-handedly changed that last year. They gave him I thought they should have paid him more, but it spoke to how much Jones wanted to stay, that he stayed on a relatively low deal of a little bit north of $10 million. That was a whole funny thing, by the way. We were at the Inglewood at the end of the season last year, the final game. His agent tried to post up the Rappaports and the national people with, well, this isn't a done deal, and we've got a lot of work to do. And so we go up to Ernest Jones, who we've been talking to he said, man, I want to be here. I want to be here. So we went up to him. What about this agent saying that this is not – don't listen to that. I'm signing. I'm staying. I love this place. I love Macdonald. It's going to be done. I'm not even worried about it. He takes something of a relative hometown discount and stays in Seattle. He loves it here. His family, his wife, their 2 young kids love it here. He is Mike. To me, as long as Mike Macdonald is the coach, Ernest Jones is the middle linebacker of this team.
And that's just a great thing for Seattle in general, going from the Bobby Wagner era with Pete Carroll to now going to Mike Macdonald and his linebacker and Ernest Jones. So speaking a little bit about, obviously, the Mike Macdonald effect, Greg, has it been kind of interesting to you for some of these players that were with Pete for so long, and even that one season between the Pete and Mike transition, to quickly adapt to Mike Macdonald's way of doing things? Like, how have they all adjusted so quickly?
Well, if you're there every day, it wasn't quick. They were looking at him at the start of last season, training camp, and preseason in the early part of last season going, okay, well, what are you trying to do here? What are these one-word calls that we're supposed to jump into these changes right at the snap? Why are we going all over the place like it's a fire drill at the snap? How's this going to work? I don't – really? How are we going to do this? And then it wasn't working. They were last in the NFL against the run. And everyone – in the locker room, they were like, this is going to take a while. I'm talking about on defense. And again, I keep going back to Ernest Jones. They bring Ernest Jones in, and all of a sudden, bam, they were one of the top 5 NFL defenses over the last half of last season. You could trace that directly to Ernest Jones's arrival. Now, there were some other things, and guys got healthier, but the main impetus for that was Ernest Jones. And when he showed up, it started looking like, oh, okay, this 36, 37-year-old new first-time head coach might know what he's doing here. Not to mention, he's still somewhat of he's very of a hard line, no nonsense with the players, but he's also something of a player's coach. He lets them be themselves. He lets them have fun in the locker room. He lets them, after games, it looks like a frat house in there, like it always has under Pete Carroll. The music bumping at practice is exactly the same as it used to be. They have contests and games and tricks and things. And yesterday they had a big trick-or-treat Halloween set up in the indoor practice field for the kids of the players. Players like that stuff. Players love that after the Monday night game, instead of bringing them Tuesday morning back into the facility to rehab and watch film, he said, no, you're done. Bye week starts now. So they left Monday night from Lumen Field and spread off to Cancun and families and wherever else, back to their college and high schools. They didn't even have to come in the next day. I asked Macdonald, hey, in film today, did you show them this? And he said, I didn't bring them in today. They're off. Little things like that add up, Bryce, over time. For a first-time head coach who's trying to get buy-in from his players, he pushes them hard, but he also gives them cookies, and quite a few of them from time to time, that start to add up. So he's got buy-in. They're 5-2. They're in first place. They were the number one defense at the start of last season. He's got the buy-in, especially on the defensive side of the ball where he spent so much time. The challenge remains what it was back in March and in August to get the offense to that point. And he brought in Kubiak to at least have the mentality of the offense that Macdonald wants to have of dictating physicality, of running the ball, but they aren't there yet. And they don't have quite the same mentality and results as quickly as the change defense did last year. I mean, they're getting there and they're passing the ball better and efficiently, and Darnold's leading the league in yards per attempt, but that's not what Macdonald wants his offense to be. So they're not there yet.
All right, Greg. So we'll kind of look at the back end of this season now, the second part of the season. And are the Seahawks really built for a deep run in January? And I know you've alluded to they've got to win these 3 games coming up in the NFC West here with the Rams and the 49ers. But what do you think is realistic of a projection of the record for this team in the back half here? They're 5-2. What do you think they finish as?
Well, here's the thing about this question, Bryce. The literal, are they built for it? Yes. They're built to run the ball. They're built to dictate field position, time of possession, and pace of game with their running game in the offense and pass off of it. They're not producing for January to me. To me, they're like Green Bay or a lot of other teams in the NFC that are pass first, pass dependent to get their yardage for first downs and for points. And that is not how they're supposed to be built. So Macdonald has constructed them and how he believes they should be built for January offensively, but they aren't producing and performing at that. If they can win the division game, and I can't lose, of course, the rest of the games because then the division games won't matter. But let's say they hold water and win 5 out of 7 non-division games the rest of the way. They've got 10 games left. Let's say they go 5-2, 4-3 in the non-division. Well, we're taking aside Arizona. So they have 9 non-division games left. Let's say they beat Arizona at home. It's going to come down to those 3 games, 2 against the Rams and 1 of the 49ers. And if they can play offense against those teams the way they are designed to, and that is running the ball and having short third downs where they can run or pass, then yes, they're built for January because they will win those games to me because of their defense. And they will then win the division and have home playoff games. And if you're at home in the playoffs, Seahawks history tells you got a good chance at the Super Bowl. We all know how many times they have gone to the Super Bowl without home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. This many times. That's how important it is for them to win the division because you're not going to get home playoff games unless you win the NFC West. So they're built for it. They're not producing and performing for it yet, with the caveat that they've got 3 more chances. 4 if you count the Arizona home game.
So in your opinion, being inside that building, Greg, what does this organization define a success this season? Is it winning the NFC West? Is it winning multiple playoff games? Where for them is this was a successful season? I know we could all say, winning the Super Bowl, that's every team's aspiration generally at the beginning of a season. What do you think for this team, the vibes you're getting in there, what is their kind of success is this year?
The minimum is winning the division, to proving that they are superior to San Francisco and the Rams. That's the minimum. Macdonald doesn't just say it. He acts it. He prepares it that his minimum is the Super Bowl. Remember, this is a guy who came from Baltimore and John Harbaugh, and those teams weren't exactly awful. They were always on the doorstep, either in the Super Bowl a couple times or at the doorstep of it. That's what Macdonald thinks this team should be. And with the defense that has performed as way it has, he thinks he can win with the defense. So to him, a successful season is going to the Super Bowl. That's easy to say and harder to do. They aren't getting to the Super Bowl unless they win the division. So to answer your question, winning the NFC West to me is a successful season. Then would be a massive disappointment if they lost home playoff games with this defense the way it is.
So, Greg, give me one player for you that after this bye can change potentially the trajectory of a unit, whether it be offense, defense, special teams, or even a coach that you think could change the trajectory for this team in a positive way after the bye.
I would say Kenneth Walker because of how they want to play and how they're designed to play. But Cooper Kupp, if Kupp produces first downs like he did, even a fraction of what he did in the Rams, with how Smith and Jigba is playing, now the defense is in trouble pass defense. Who are we going to key on? We can't just leave Kupp alone if Darnold's going to throw to him for first downs on third down. So far, that hasn't happened a whole lot. I think you're going to see even more tilt of coverages to Smith and Jigba than it's already happened. He's had shadow, I mentioned, the safety over the top and some bracket coverage. You might see some flat-out double teams the way that all the targets are going, and you rarely see that in the NFL where two dudes are shading one guy and shadowing one guy. You may see that the way that the skewed distribution of targets have been lately for Seattle. But if Kupp is producing on third down out of the slot, on 3rd and 6, getting 7, 8, 10-yard gains, then teams can't do that. So Kupp, to me, is really, really important to how they play offense the rest of the season, putting aside the Kenneth Walker piece. And on defense, when Devin Witherspoon comes back, Nick Emanwori has a chance to be a Pro Bowl player as a rookie, as a nickel, if he's playing there every down. He's that good. He's maybe even better than they thought he'd be this soon. They knew he was going to be a Kyle Hamilton type, but I don't think, Bryce, they thought he was going to be this sure of a tackler in the open field and this much of a force in a one-spot nickel. He was going to move him all around as a chess piece. I think he's realizing, let's stick him at nickel because we can play him at run defense and at cover and blitz from one position. And if he does that, that's good. But Witherspoon on the outside, Witherspoon has a chance to make a real impact in a new spot for him, which is outside corner in passing situations. He hasn't done that much in his career. He's been a nickel in most of his career when it goes to third down. To me, Emanwori is too good to move out of that position right now.
All right, and my final question here in this segment, Greg, for you is if you're writing the headline in January, what does it say about this team?
Seahawks win NFC West, not how they were designed. That they throw the ball. Smith and Jigba leads are at the top, near the top of the NFL in receiving yards. Darnold throws for 30 touchdown passes, and they're near the bottom in yards per attempt in rushing. Again, not at all how they were built to. That if their defense can be that good, they can get away without a running game. Well, let's say without a running game that they want to produce at. They're going to still run the ball. You're still going to be throwing stuff at your TV. Why are they running the ball on 2nd and 9? They're going to, because that's how Macdonald has demanded that Kubiak play it, and that's how they're going to run it. But if their defense can still dominate games, and the Tampa Bay game is an example of what happens if the defense can't dominate games. If the defense can dominate games, they can probably get away with winning the division without a consistent running game again, but they have to run the ball against the Rams and 49ers to win the division.
I am so okay with them running on 2nd and 9, Greg. I just don't want to see any more trick plays. Like bury the trick play playbook, Milrow package playbook, just bury it all. Leave it there. I'm fine with that. I'm so over the trick plays in the
Macdonald. I asked Macdonald after the game, "You're going to put that Kupp reverse pass in the freezer?" He goes, "Yeah, that's going in the freezer." Kupp, by the way, he didn't want to talk about that play after the game. He was so mad at himself for the throw. He fancies himself as a better quarterback passer than that, and he was pretty upset at himself for that.
Oh boy. Well, Greg, the last thing I do with all my guests that come on the show is we do a 2-minute drill. So it's a quick 10 questions, rapid fire. You're given one time out in that process to move to another question. And that's how we finish all the shows. So we'll get into that right after this.
Let's go.
Do I get bonus yardage if I don't use the timeout?
We will give you bonus yardage if you don't get if you don't use a timeout, Greg. So here we go. Question 1. One word for you to describe the 2025 Seahawks season so far.
Incomplete and inconclusive.
Okay. Question 2. Most underrated storyline you've covered this season on this team.
Byron Murphy, pass rush, every down, defensive tackle.
Okay. Question 3. Player who's grown the most since week 1.
Drake Thomas.
Okay. Question 4. Strongest position group on the team right now.
I still say secondary now that they're healthier again.
Okay. Question 5. Darnold's leadership, underrated or properly rated?
Underrated. He's been a surprise, a revelation to them in that regard.
Okay. Question 6. If you had to hand out a midseason game ball, who gets it at this point?
Jackson Smith-Njigba. He would get all the cake.
Okay. Question 7. More impactful so far, Leo Williams or JSN?
Smith-Njigba. He's almost single-handedly pushed the offense to winning games.
Okay. Question 8. If a trade happens, what position will it be for?
Defensive tackle.
Okay. Question 9. Most telling moment you've seen at practice this year?
Leonard Williams pulling Gray Zabel aside and teaching him almost every day, actually. That is constant. He gives him pointers, and, yeah, he's a coach on the field for him.
Okay. Question 10. The Seahawks finish with what record, and how far do they go in the playoffs?
I knew this was coming. Are they 5-2 right now? Got 10 games left. They're going to go 11-6. And I'm going to predict that they beat the Rams. They split with the Rams. They beat the 49ers. They beat Arizona, so they win the division. 11-6.
And how far do they go in the playoffs?
They win their first home game. Probably not a high enough seed where they get a bye, so they're going to have to play 2. I say they reach the NFC Championship.
Okay, so that was the 2-minute drill. All right, Greg. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and giving us that insight into this team so far into the season, Greg, and definitely look forward to having you back maybe just before the playoffs or after the playoffs are over and we see where this team finally finished out. But, Greg, tell my listeners and viewers like where they can find more of your stuff, where they can hear more of your insights into the team.
Oh, thanks, Bryce. Twitter X, whatever the kids call it now, it's at GBell Seattle, and online, thenewstribune.com. Seahawks section of the sports section there.
All right, Greg. Well, I won't take up any more of your time. And again, I appreciate so much for you giving me some of your time today to talk about the Hawks and the direction of this team.
Thank you, sir. Always great to talk to you guys. Take care.
All right, guys. That was guest Gregg Bell, Seahawks beat reporter and for the Tacoma News Tribune. Really love having Greg come on the show. He gives me such a great insight, just like Corbin Smith, to what's going on in this locker room, how this team is coming together. And Greg's been and seen a lot of what has changed in that Seattle Seahawks organization. And even throughout the NFL, he spent time as a beat reporter for the Raiders. So I always value Greg's takes. And he gave us some interesting nuggets there, talking about the Wyatt Teller situation, talking about where he thinks they could potentially go if they are to add someone in the trade deadline, and just how this team's built, and the emotional leadership of Ernest Jones from where he came in last year to where he is now, and how much it's affected that team, and making the kind of the point that as long as Mike Macdonald's here, there's a good chance Ernest Jones might be the linebacker that is here with Mike Macdonald as well. So as always, guys, it's stuff like this that I love to have discussions with and bring to you guys as listeners and viewers. So make sure, again, as always, you guys click that notification button. Sorry, that's a little loud, but click that notification button, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, guys. And we've got a couple other cool things coming out. We have Seahawks Syndicate coming out tomorrow, so make sure you guys check that out live at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And outside of that, as always, stay loud, be loud, and go Hawks. Have a good night, everybody.